Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. So if I can you can keep kind of like, if you can start to kind of, quiet down a little bit. Thank you. You can keep eating, but if you can keep your conversation to a minimum, that would be great, because we're going to get started with the last part of our program. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Julio Rodriguez. I'm the Deputy Director for the Office of Employment and Training at the Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. So, okay, that's it. That's right. We're one workforce, so let's make sure that we remember that. We're done with the silos. We're all about, let's make sure that we're integrated, keeping our eye on the prize, which is helping people be in a better place than when they got to us. And that means employers as well as job seekers. So, yes. So I have the pleasure of being able to introduce a new sort of element to this conference or to this summit. And that is, we've gone through some interesting years. Some of us have weathered it a little bit better maybe than others. But at the end of the day, we're all still here. And the importance of this particular summit is the theme of we're one workforce. Oftentimes we hear, especially in the state of Illinois, that we're a very siloed system. And that may be true on the surface, but I think when you talk to the people in this room and to many of the people who do the work on the front line, you all have not only good relationships, you have deep relationships. Some of you have known each other. Some of you have actually moved from one agency to another. Some of you have moved up. Some of you may have moved laterally. But at the end of the day, those relationships you started with locally have not only been strengthened, but have actually grown as a result of the pandemic and many of the changes and things that we have faced as a nation and as a state. Okay. I'm buying her a drink later. Just kidding. But I actually want to say, because I've known Brian, the executive director of the Illinois Community College Board, and Ronnie Patrick, who's the director of the Division of Rehab Services. And I've actually known my new boss and my new director, Director Richards, for quite some time. And so we've been in this space, maybe not always in the same role, but we've been doing this work. And we are all very fortunate that we have such a tremendous team statewide that give us reason to pause in terms of our pride and our admiration for all of you. So you should all give yourselves a hand. So as I said, I'm really excited because one of the great results was, when we talk about partnerships and we talk about creating systems change, one of the root elements of that is collaboration. And when I first came into the field, people thought, well, a partnership is a collaboration. And those of you who do the work in collaboration know, no, a partnership is just the beginning of what will hopefully become a collaboration. Because a collaboration is not only about knowing what the goal is, but it's sharing the same values, the same understanding. And here's where it gets tough: being willing to give up your resources for those same values and same goals. And we are fortunate enough in Illinois to have lots of examples of collaboration. So that is why we have decided, well, not me, but the committee decided it was time that we really acknowledge and recognize that collaboration. And so we have the opportunity today to recognize two groups through a process that the committee set up that really speak to that question of collaboration and really speak to the values that I talked about, which is really about values, goals, and helping the people of Illinois achieve their success, however they define it. And so I'm fortunate enough right now to bring up two of my colleagues, and I'd like to say friends, my boss and director, Director Richards, and Ronnie Patrick, the director of Voc Rehab for the Illinois Department of Human Services. So.
Thank you, Julio. I wanted to, wait, hold on. Oh, you're leaving? I'll give you a business hug. Yay, business. Thank you for all of your service. The first time that I started in this job, you were like, so glad you're here. And I was like, I wasn't even sure if I was glad. And thank you. Thank you so much. It's been awesome. Many years to come, right? Well, I'm Renee Patrick. For my DRS folks in the room. Whoop. Hey. I'm happy to give an award to some place I actually visited in person, and it was so impactful for me as someone who did get special education services from my local school. Our school district was a cooperative, so the deaf kid was bused to a school in Lakeville, and I was bused to Walkerton, and so I'm very familiar with what sort of like isolation that young people with disabilities experience just because of this how service delivery happens. But there is a very special place that embraces the wholeness of a person with their disability. And that is the Center for Academic and Vocational Education, also known as the CAVE. And it's so cool when you come in, it's got like this really awesome like sculpture that was made by the folks that go through there. And it's huge, it's 100,000 square feet. They repurposed something that was made for a leisure place for people who could pay a expensive membership, and now it's for young people. And so it's really an example of what can be done to get folks engaged in the workforce and at a young time in their life. So this is an alternative school complex that has state-of-the-art equipment and curriculum that is providing students of Belleville Township District 201 schools advanced training and education and access to high-paying employment. This project is a true collaboration with education, government, workforce development, and employers. And so they have like a world-class kitchen, like people, I forget what the term is. Oh, industrial kitchen. So folks can experience that. There is a really cool, are there any gamers in the room? You don't have to admit it. I know you're out there. But there's like a super cool gaming lab that is a source of employment, and it's really something to marvel at. So if you can swing by, and I'd like to have folks from CAVE come on up and be recognized for your excellent innovation and work.
I'll be brief. Good afternoon. My name is Brian Menzer. I'm superintendent of Belleville High Schools. I am humbled by this recognition. Our goal is really to do two things for the young people in our community. Number one is to remove the barriers from their lives that are keeping them from finding high-paying jobs that can change their entire family trajectory. And the second thing is to increase the access that they have to employers and opportunities. And so we've managed to partner with about 75 of our local businesses. We're wonderfully situated about 15 miles from downtown St. Louis, which is helpful. But we have a large aviation contingency and machining contingency in our communities. And so we're really excited about what it's doing, and we appreciate very much this recognition. So thank you.
And I'll hand it off to Director Richards. I'm really happy to be your colleague. Director.
I'm always happy to be your colleague. Thank you. Thank you. And I just have to also congratulate 201. I didn't realize that you were receiving that award today. I grew up in Belleville. It's very much home. So to any Metro Easters in the room, good afternoon. It's happy to see all of you. And I know the great things you're doing at the Cave. It's really making a tremendous impact on the youth in that area. So our next award is another example of how the power of collaboration within our system positively impacts the lives of those that we serve. So this particular collaboration is focused on improving services for veterans and their spouses. A multi-agency leadership team, including the Illinois Department of Veterans Affairs and other veteran service providers, worked together to develop a plan for connecting veterans to workforce services and programs. After identifying areas for improvement through journey mapping, the team piloted a program at the Lake County Workforce Development One-Stop Facility. The partners demonstrated a remarkable willingness to adapt and provide outstanding service to their community. So I'd like to really congratulate the team members for their exceptional collaboration and dedication to serving veterans. Jennifer Serino, Eva Locke, Damar Harris, and Raisin Grant from Lake County Workforce Development. Come on up if you're in the room. Ted Duckett, Theodore Duckett. Theodore, if you're here, he serves as the IDES Northern Region Business Services Manager. Kathleen Wagger, who serves as the IDES Local Veterans Employment Representative, and Suzette Robinson, who serves as the IDES Disabled Veterans Outreach Program Specialist in Lake County. So please join us in applauding this outstanding team for their achievements in improving the lives of our veterans and their families. Thank you for everything that you do. Okay, Julio, are we on to the next stage of the program? There he is. Here comes Tony. I'm gonna get rid of the mic. There you go.
Thank you. Other directors, if you could join us up here. So good afternoon, or morning still. I'm not sure what it is at this point. So for those who don't know me, my name's Tony Furman. I serve as Director for Madison County Employment and Training, and currently also serve as President of the Illinois Workforce Partnership, which is the association of the 22 local workforce areas throughout the state of Illinois. Joining me on stage today, already introduced DCO Director Kristen Richards, Dr. Brian Durham, Executive Director for the Illinois Community College Board, Carrie Thomas, Deputy Director, Business Services for the Illinois Department of Employment Security, and Ronnie Patrick with the Division of Rehab Services. So we have a series of questions. Each one of you have a series of questions. When the original person is done, if somebody else wants to add on, please do. So, Director Richards, we will start with you. CEJA is a term that we all keep hearing. How do you see traditional workforce partners being involved in these hubs? And do you anticipate new partners having key pieces of the implementation of CEJA?
Okay. Oh, it's on. Okay. Thank you for the question, Tony, and for moderating the panel. And I'm delighted to be joined by my colleagues here in state government. There is a tremendous amount of enthusiasm, I presume, in this room for all of the possibilities associated with the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act, or CEJA. I think many of you know that act is really a result of grassroots collaboration statewide, focused on finding some solutions for Illinois' clean energy future and supporting all of the workforce needs to make sure that we are equipped to properly staff that future. And I'm just delighted to be at DCEO and work with Julio and Hillary and our implementation teams. The legislation, as I mentioned, was really a result of this grassroots effort. And I think what makes CEJA so different is that we envision that workforce component to also really look like a collaborative effort. We've used the word collaboration a lot in this room since I've joined all of you, and it is a fundamental component of CEJA and that hub process. Local workforce areas, of course, will play a critical role in the workforce hubs, as will community colleges, other education associations located within each of the hubs. I understand that there are consortia that are being, pulled together currently to envision what each hub will tackle as they begin the process of recruitment, assessment, developing wraparound and transition services, training, and other job supports that will be eventually part of that overall clean energy future ecosystem. So please keep an eye out for additional updates from DCEO as we continue to roll out the application process for CEJA. There are many, many more programming opportunities to come.
Thank you. Director Durham, the community colleges are much more than associate's degrees and certificates. How do you see the local community colleges partnering with businesses to create specific training for an employer in a short turnaround time?
Turn it on, apparently. It's the limit of my tech skills. Thank you, Tony, for the question, and it is also, I want to express how great it is to be up here with my colleagues, and I know community colleges are very excited about their role in CEJA and appreciate all the hard work that DCEO has put into that. It's a big program and a big lift, so I know that's a lot to do and appreciate it. So community colleges, are multiple mission institutions, and so often people think about community colleges, they think about students that go there that transfer to the four-year university, or somebody who might want to go and be a welder or do construction or do IT, and you can get those kind of degrees there as well. But maybe less known, but certainly very prominent locally, is the role community colleges play with local employers. We did an economic impact study just a couple of years ago, and it showed that community colleges, collectively the system touched 9,800 unique employers across the system. And they do that through a variety of ways. Among those are through service on advisory committees, and then certainly by providing direct services to employers. They, for example, through their corporate training and non-credit arm, there's so many ways on the credit side that they do this too, but just thinking about employer services specifically, colleges will do things like serve as apprenticeship intermediaries, offer on-site customized training. Across the board, they're doing workforce services and will help with procurement and grants, certainly do things like skills assessment. I mean, really, the suite is pretty significant on what colleges can bring to the table, and not the least of which is their partnership with WIOA, other WIOA partners, both core and required partners, and work certainly closely with many Title I partners, and some serve as Title I partners as well. So a big part of what they do, and I think at the core of it is that first word in the name, community college. I mean, they're there to serve their community in all ways that they can, and do that with students, but also do it with employers.
Thank you.
Tony, can I add to that?
Yes, you may.
Okay, so I also wanted to recognize too that the College Board did partner with the Illinois Department of Human Services Division of Mental Health to bring credentials to folks that have psychiatric disabilities or lived expertise and allow them to get a certified recovery support specialist credential. And so, and that is a way for people that have lived expertise to be able to address workforce shortages that community mental health centers are facing, even state government is facing, and to build a pipeline of workers that not have received services and now are getting trained to give back. So, thanks for that partnership.
Deputy Director Thomas. Hiring remains strong in many sectors. At the same time, rumors about a recession persist and inflation continues to impact on budgets of families and businesses. What is one aspect of current labor market that you think is important to consider as we go into our next WIOA state plan?
Thanks so much. Also, I'm glad to be here on this panel today, and actually the last couple of days have been really illuminating, understanding some of the things that are going on right now in the system, and also just refreshing to be back in person and talking to people and getting to see people. We recently had an opportunity, I think all of us were there, to hear from George Putnam, so I'm going to try to channel George, who works at IDS in EINA. Many of you may have seen him before. I can't really do it justice, but I am going to say a couple of things that he said to us. So one thing is, kind of in a big picture, Illinois' economy has been pretty stable, actually, in terms of jobs and employment over the last 30 years. So obviously the pandemic economy was like a huge disruption to that, but as we've come out of it, overall the numbers of jobs, the numbers of people employed has been pretty stable. What shifts, of course, is what industries make up that mix. And so we've seen more growth in things like transportation and warehousing and professional services. I don't think that's really any news to anybody in this room. And I think what I've been thinking a lot about is, and what you hear like different aspects of this in the news, is that the pandemic economy really just reshuffled almost every aspect of how people think about work, whether you're a worker, whether you're a job seeker, whether you're an employer, whether you're an entity that works with job seekers and employers. Like, everything has been really disrupted in a lot of ways, and we're still working towards what is the new alignment going to be. And I think that all of us can just recognize that if we look at ourselves and how we're working now as opposed to how we were working 3 years ago, or the things that we and our family members and our neighbors are concerned about in terms of work. So do I have childcare? I mean, I've been hearing all these things over the last 2 days, like the childcare industry has changed. So there may not be the same childcare centers or childcare hours that there were in my community. That may change the types of jobs that I look at. That may change the types of hours I want to work. As an employer, you have to really think about your hiring practices differently when people now are thinking about the stresses of jobs, whether you can work virtually or not. So that sort of alignment and balance and equilibrium is still very much the case, even though the big picture is we're coming out, we've got the lower unemployment rate, the number of jobs, we're still seeing jobs grow. I think going into the next WIOA state plan, and some of you have heard me talk about this, that this is really the opportunity to take the expertise that has been developed across this system and think about what should our virtual service delivery infrastructure be? What did we learn from the pandemic? What kinds of skills and competencies did we as individuals and as systems develop? What are some of the innovations we tried? And so what do we need as Illinois to be sort of a virtual workforce service delivery system? And how do we make that sustainable over time? We have to really think about it as part of our infrastructure. So I know some people in this room have heard me talk about this before, and I really think it should be a prominent part of what we think about during the state planning process. I also would add to that, it's a huge opportunity. We don't have the answers, and I'm not sure that we should expect ourselves to have the answers right now, but we really should carve out the time to work together and kind of collaborate on what we've learned, whether it's local, whether it's state, whether it's in community colleges, whether it's in community-based organizations. And remember that in addition to it being a new way to deliver services, it creates a huge amount of access and inclusion in ways that we probably should have been thinking more about before the pandemic.
Director Patrick, how can workforce development agencies partner best with organizations who work with individuals with disabilities?
Well, I think the best way is to be just very open to the fact that people with disabilities do want to be part of the workforce. And so if you have that deep commitment about someone who presents as having a disability and are able to battle off perceived stigma, discrimination, we've all inherited a long-time belief that having a disability is equal to not working, not being productive. There's laws from the 1600s, 1400s that allowed disabled people to beg because everyone knew that they weren't going to work. And that's not true. And so you be aware of yourself in terms of what is the possibilities, and be open about what sort of mind shifts that you need to change and bring to the table. And then I'd also recommend that you get to know some rehabilitation counselors too at the Division of Rehabilitation Services. These are master level experts in terms of helping understanding what it means, what the value of talent with disabilities can bring to the economy. So that's what I would say.
Thank you. Director Richards, we're back to that end of the table. There have been a lot of discussions, studies, and reports around equity and access in relation to the workforce system. How will these conversations and recommendations be incorporated into the new WIOA state plan that is being developed?
Tony, I think simply put, equity and access will be front and center, top of mind as we work together to pursue the next state plan. So much work has gone into this. For many of you, work has gone into equity and access, inclusion, accessibility for decades. It has been the focal point of your career, and it is what you have tirelessly brought to the workforce system. For others, it has become a centering activity, particularly as we have lived through this pandemic and tried to make sense of what is it that people need now in terms of support. Perhaps that looks a little bit different than what it did prior to March of 2020. So, it will be top of mind for us. I think what that looks like in a real functional way, to me anyway, is continued collaboration, building support among stakeholders. Some of you in the room have been involved in the Governor's Commission on Workforce Equity and Access. That has certainly been a centering exercise that has, in part, allowed us to think in a more granular way about the journey a job seeker encounters when they are going to an American Job Center, when they are walking into a one-stop center, or when they perhaps have recently been dislocated from work and are thinking about just where it is that they need to go from here, right? So centering activities, again, focusing on equity, access, inclusion, accessibility. I'm hopeful that there are some very concrete approaches that we can take in our plan when we are thinking about, for example, our physical spaces. How are they welcoming and accessible? What is the ideal footprint of a physical AJC? what is the workforce workflow process that an individual encounters when they are coming into a center? How are we helping our customers receive those services? So again, I do think this will be front and center for all of us, and I'm really looking forward actually to continuing some of the good work that was done with the WIOA Equity Committee and with the Governor's Commission as we pursue the process of putting together that state plan.
Thank you. Director Durham, workforce development means many different things to many people. How do you define workforce development and how it relates to the community college system in Illinois?
Well, let me say that I think workforce development has also meant many things over many years. And this is, a concept that I think is continuously evolving. And for example, in relation to those comments, Kristen's comments here, we really have to do workforce development with equity and access at the center of how we help individuals meet their career goals and get on a career path. Most, workforce programs that you see at a community college on the career side are skills-based. They prepare individuals for specific occupations, but what they also bring is a focus on soft skills, a focus on transferable skills, and ultimately skills that allow individuals to come out and be able to go in whatever direction they may choose with their career and be able to come back. And so that notion or concept of a career pathway is so important and so critical to our definition of workforce development. This similar type of focus on soft skills is also embedded in adult ed. Really the core partner here for WIOA. And I mean, bottom line, folks have to have basic literacy skills. They have to have digital literacy skills. I mean, we have a proposal in the governor's budget for funds around digital literacy in adult ed, because we learned a lot in the pandemic about that need, and it kind of heightened that for us. I think it all kind of comes down to ultimately making sure students, whether they're traditional students, non-traditional students, those two, false dichotomies a little bit, adult ed students, that they have the supports to be successful. And I think we're seeing supports differently, right, post-pandemic, and seeing them more broadly, so that they can continue on in a career pathway, go get a job when they want, or they can continue with their education, or in many cases, as community college students do both.
Thank you. Deputy Director Thomas, everyone points to the pandemic as having an impact on the labor market. What is one change in the labor market that you think has persisted and that we need to consider as we go into the next WIOA state plan?
Thanks. I'm going to build on what I was saying before, and I am going to and also build on a little bit what Brian said, and kind of state the obvious maybe to everybody in this room. But I think we really have to, as a system, as partners within the system, have a really strong presence in the plan that the state's Office of Broadband is putting together related to the federal funding that's available for broadband inclusion and digital inclusion. And I think many of us are at that table, but the depth of expertise, because of what happened in the pandemic, is about the workforce, about what employers are facing, and how they've changed their practices in terms of hiring because they're doing everything online or they're using QR codes, and there's the impact that has on hiring for some people who can't get through the algorithm for whatever reason, and all the aspects of digital inclusion that the workforce system and the education system is already intimately familiar with. We have to be at that table, making sure that the way the state is thinking about that, so bringing whatever your proposal and your plan was into that conversation, so that that will have a positive impact on this network of organizations and this system. I don't think anybody's keeping anybody from being at that table, but it is another thing that we have to think about, and I think that we should think about it alongside and as a part of essentially our WIOA state plan. So that's what I'd add to that.
Thank you. Director Patrick, as we await the final report of the Governor's Commission on Workforce Equity and Access, is there anything that surprised you from the Commission's work? And if it did, why did it surprise you?
I think I was most surprised about that it was an affirmation. I sort of was expecting like, we stink, like what's going to be the results, and it actually wasn't, which I'm glad, because I do believe that. Just like, you can, I don't know if you can kind of feel the vibe between all of us, but there is a vibe between us and probably my staff, or not my staff, but DRS's staff and staff, engagement in terms on the local level. There is a vibe between us, and so that was really a happy, like a good thing, because I was a little had a little dread about it, and yeah, so that's what comes out for me. Tony, can I add in something though about this inflation question?
Sure.
Okay, thank you, Tony. I appreciate you.
You think I'm going to tell any of you no?
I know.
Okay.
Well, I know, but I also just didn't want to do what I do, which is this. Everyone say a prayer for the DRS staff. This is what they have to deal with all the time. So I do want to say about the inflation. So I am concerned, like for people with disabilities, about how what's up, like the interest rates are going up, right? What's to come for us. There's some predictions about, higher unemployment. And there's a book written by Jim Charlton named Nothing About Us Without Us, where he did do a global study around people with disabilities and how they are involved in the community and how they integrate and fight for their own, humanity. And he writes in there about how unemployment rates depend actually on the high rate of unemployment that disabled people face. Like we are inequitably unemployed, disabled people are. And so we saw during the pandemic actually increase toward equity for employment for people with disabilities. And so as I'm watching what's happening with the economy, and this has happened historically, people with disabilities will be probably the first to be laid off. And so I wanted to put that in the conversation around, the economics and what our workforce is about, because that is a concern. Thanks.
Thank you. Back to the end of the table again, Director Richards. What aspects of system integration and business engagement do you think are important to consider as we go into our next WIOA state plan?
And where to begin? That's quite a question.
Hey, the good news is we're running ahead on time.
Well, are we running ahead on time? Okay.
Yeah,
I mean,
we're good.
Yeah, even. So I have I guess, I'm looking at this through with two hats on. I'm looking at this with the hat on of just prior to joining DCEO in January, working with Carrie and the team at the Illinois Department of Employment Security and that business services team, right, that's doing the outreach to employers to help with hiring events and worker retention strategies, and also having a front row to labor market information and sort of understanding, having access to the data that's telling us where the industry needs are. While at the same time wearing this hat now at DCEO, where I'm meeting every single day with companies that are looking to expand or perhaps locate in the state of Illinois, and having conversations, getting really brass tacks. What is it that you need to make sure that you are supported here from a workforce perspective, right? And there are multiple prongs, there are multiple answers to those questions that we're asking employers. I think, for us, from a system perspective, it is so much about how do we make sure that people can access our system? How can we find these folks? How do they feel comfortable working with us? Because we all know that we have the ability to then leverage a tremendous amount of services, either through our community college network, our CTE network, through the Division of Rehabilitation Services, working with individuals that perhaps have historically lacked access to employment opportunities. So it's there. It's just getting the intake and making sure that people feel comfortable finding us. And I really think what Carrie said is quite resonant. The way that people are going to access services has likely changed as a result of the pandemic. So how are we now providing access in a different way, right? That potential for virtual service delivery, also making sure that they are not confronting any digital equity issues as well should be top of mind. So a lot there. The very, very cool thing about this system really is the cohesion with the employer community and our service provider community. And I think that we have learned so much more coming out of this pandemic that will help better inform that state planning process going forward.
Thank you. Director Durham, what are some of the priorities for ICCB related to adult education that the other parts of the workforce development system should know more about?
Well, I want to kind of build on two sets of comments here. I mean, I think one is we want to make sure that the adult ed system, with all its strength, is firmly and directly integrated into the overall workforce system. I mean, one of the challenges we have across all the partners, and this is the 4 core and the whatever 15, 17 that are required, everybody does something a little differently. And so understanding that landscape is such a challenge. But adult education is fundamentally, it's an education program, but we have certainly worked to make it more integrated and more connected to the workforce side of that equation through things like integrated education and training programs where an individual can be in an adult ed course and take credit career and technical education courses. And I know folks know what that is, but think about the power of that before it used to be you were on this lockstep path and you couldn't even access those things until you got that high school equivalency. And now you can open up that college opportunity, that career opportunity so much earlier. And I think making sure that's connected in the broader scheme across the system is really important. And then I also, and this kind of gets to Ronnie's comments too about individuals with disabilities and employment and technology. I mean, we have a moment here really post-pandemic where we have all rapidly learned to utilize technology in a way that we weren't even really thinking about before this. I mean, I could tell you that ChatGPT wrote my comments for you here today. No, not really, but I bet it could, right? But so, we've used so much technology, and I think we've got to figure out how to leverage that in the plan. And I know we're working in adult ed to figure out how to leverage and utilize technology better in that plan. Now, just a couple more comments on adult ed. We have done a pretty significant marketing campaign. As you can imagine, we had a pretty massive enrollment drop because those were exactly the folks that are one barrier away from not being able to continue on. And so we have done a pretty significant recruitment and marketing campaign and have brought enrollment up about 30% year over year here in the last couple of years, and that's stabilized pretty well. And so now we're focusing our efforts on retention. And I think one of our key parts of retention is that connecting piece, is that connector to the other systems, is making sure that we can leverage things like the ability to access training incentives or vouchers or whatever it's called in the workforce system, making sure we're connecting referrals properly. I mean, all that. I mean, ultimately, it comes down to coordination and collaboration, I think.
Deputy Director Thomas, what are some new opportunities for service integration or cross-partner coordination that you see on the horizon?
Well, one thing that is has already been around, but I think is, we saw some of it at this summit, is really, and we saw it in the Governor's Commission work, is really using the tools of human-centered design in figuring out even discrete small challenges in service integration or collaboration. So if anybody had been in that session that was done on human-centered design and how they applied that work in Detroit, I think the message that I took away was like, you can name a small challenge, get together with the people that you think have something, and sort of work through using some of these human-centered design principles to really figure out what is a solution. And everybody working on that together creates automatically a certain amount of buy-in. I also think, so going way up, I actually think one of the messages coming from the U.S. Department of Labor that they have, and I'm going to learn more about this next week, and I think Julio will be there too, is this Yes, WIOA Can, which I thought originally was like the WIOA, I don't know, there was a brand that was sort of like that a few years ago that was about WIOA can help, provide training to, all different industries. This is what I understand from the U.S. Department of Labor is this is the U.S. Department of Labor saying there are actually a lot of flexibilities in WIOA that we aren't maximizing, and they are here to help us maximize that. So I think that is an opportunity on the horizon. Okay, we all know that takes forever and maybe it won't work perfectly, but I think we should take advantage of it. And I would also say that I just lost my train of thought, so I think I'll just end there. Maybe I'll come back to it.
Yeah, feel free.
Director Patrick, what are some of best practices in certain areas that could be replicated in other areas to better serve individuals with disabilities?
Where's 201 at, huh? Right, that was a great super example. And that is actually something that our local office staff has been helpful in for Division Rehab Services. And then we had the local other titles, come together, and the school district. And so that's one example that comes to mind in terms of a best practice around our collaboration. I also have seen where we are funding through Division of Rehab Services through vendors that is led mightily by Kristen Wagner, who is in the room, and I'm sure she's really upset that I mentioned her name, but I really think she needs to be recognized. Yes, Kristen, thank you. So we do have a lot of contracts with school districts and also Centers for Independent Living, which are nonprofit agencies run by people with disabilities, for people with disabilities. And so they are working on getting young people with disabilities in special education into healthcare employment, which is, there's been a need for that for, years now. So that's still continuing, and that's in Rockford, Illinois. So we have a lot of variety of practices that are available, but I do think, we need to innovate more and even work tighter together around, trying to bring in the talent of folks with disabilities. I'm very interested, though, to find out, I have the microphone, about what you all find out in terms of this weekend, because, I think one of the struggles we found out with it became super, a lot of light came onto it, is that vocational rehabilitation, we only can work with people with disabilities. All of our funds are only for folks with disabilities. And having known the, late Judy Heumann and other people with disabilities who led these programs on the federal level, it's on purpose, it's by design that the funds are only for folks with disabilities. How do we then braid and blend with these kind of intentions of being, addressing inequity for people with disabilities and be able to get along, right? So sometimes my staff are faced with having to say no, even though their heart is like on fire to do something with a yes. And I know that rehab services on the federal level has been giving us a lot of technical assistance about how to do that. So be interested to find out too.
So, sure. Hold on to that mic. You're going to be next.
I mean, I've been trying to figure out how to work this in, so you gave me the opportunity. Thank you. One thing to think about as you are working with individuals that need training, and I think it applies here as well, is that if you're not aware on the credit side, so if you're in a 16-week, one semester program for whatever that may be, that MAP dollars that used to only fund students that were in a year or more will now fund 3 credit hour programs. And that's through ISAC, and that's really based on Governor Pritzker's increase that we got last year and will be built upon if we are lucky enough to get the increase this year. But I think that's really one way, and a lot of non-college folks are not really aware of that change, and it's really significant, and because they use the federal financial aid system. There are ways through ISAC to apply for undocumented students as well. So I think one opportunity for that braiding that you're raising there.
So as the conference winds down, usually people leave conferences with at least one good eye or charged up about something. So as the leaders of the core state departments in WIOA, we want to ask you all the same last question. We'll start with Dr. Patrick, or Director Patrick. Congratulations on your PhD, but okay.
10-year goal.
There you go. Can you provide all of us one item that you are optimistic about for the next year?
Well, I'm very optimistic about what was mentioned here at the table, which is around the technology piece and the broadband. DRS was involved in terms of helping with trying to, maximize the maps and being recognized for areas that don't have coverage. And I do think that is going to be critical. Nationally, there are studies and even opinion pieces that were written by people with disabilities saying that the flexibilities that they weren't allowed to have pre-pandemic in terms of working from home or having video access to meetings and things like that was a real game changer for them keeping their jobs and being engaged with their employment. And they were still very productive. And so I'm very, very excited about that. I am also, though, having been in person and talked to my staff, they do miss getting together, and there is a certain loss that we all need to recognize about that camaraderie, that human connection. And I think as a leader of the agency, I believe very strongly that an engaged workforce is a super effective workforce. And so how do you have that camaraderie while you maintain, get that production and bring that equity of access to employment for folks with disabilities? So I like challenges, so that's what's making me charged up.
Thank you. Deputy Director Thomas, same question.
I would say, so one of the things I think many of us were disappointed in that Congress did not do in its sort of infrastructure spending was to do what it did during the last big recession, which was to give the workforce system additional dollars to be able to be part of that plan. But what I'm very optimistic about for Illinois is that I feel like all of the investments that have been made with federal dollars up to this point and some state dollars in things like the apprenticeship infrastructure. I think CEJA, I think the way that broadband is positioned here is actually, even without that federal money, I think that we as a state and as a community are pretty well positioned to be able to respond as sort of new jobs are coming online because of the infrastructure spending. Sorry if that's what you were going to say, Kristen. It's perfect.
Okay. So Director Patrick, watch this recovery. Dr. Durham, same question.
Everything that they said, it's gonna be good. Well, I will say I'm pretty excited about Yes, WIOA Can. That's the first I had heard of that, and yeah, I mean, I want to go. Yeah, no, I think to echo my colleagues and overall, really the conversation. I mean, collaboration. Obviously, we have it. We do it. We're going to continue to do it, and I think we need to look for opportunities. I think I'm really excited about, as we engage in the WIOA state plan, an opportunity to have a venue to talk about these lessons that we have learned over the last few years. I mean, I expect what we come out with will look very different because of technology changes, because of, I would say, heightened focus on equity and inclusion and access as we think about workforce development. And we're going to have a place where we have to sit down and think about it and plan for how it's going to be integrated into the system. And I think that's powerful. And sometimes you need a requirement to make you be able to sit down and have those conversations.
So, Director Richards, you have the last word on optimism.
Yeah, listen, it's ditto city, but I mean, here's how I would end it. I think that we have a tremendous opportunity to make sure that the story of the Illinois workforce system is told, and that we lead with our successes. I am, as I said earlier, in meetings every single day with folks that are interested in coming to the Illinois and into Illinois and providing opportunities for Illinoisans. And I'm leading with the workforce story because I just know how good all of you are. You are really so good. And you are sincere in the work that you do. And it is, it's at your very core. And so, I see this in the collaboration with the 4 agencies that we have at this table. I see this with all of our other partners across the state, and I see that in all of you, and I really mean it. I think that we have the opportunity to make sure the story of this system is told, and we're going to do that through making sure that access to the system is top of mind as we move forward from here.
If you would all help thank the panel for their time and expertise. So as we close out the conference, a couple notes, like Andy started with housekeeping, I'll end with housekeeping. The evaluation is on the app, and you will be emailed the evaluation later today. It's very important for the planning committee that you fill out these evaluations, give us your honest feedback, which would be the conference started with some amazingly good-looking man and ended with some amazingly good-looking man. But we thank you all for attending, both in person and online. And all the people here heading for home, please have a safe trip back, and thank you for everything you do.